Hey everyone, Digital Scriptorium here, and today I want to show off how to install Windows 11 25H2, aka the newest release for the year of 2025 and most of 2026 from start to finish. I'm just going to give a few details before we dive in so you know what you're getting yourself into. This guide is intended as a general use case installation of the operating system. I'm going to show off the system requirements, how to create the bootable media, how to install the operating system, and then I'm going to be going over some basic tips and tricks of the operating system at the end. I won't be going into any specific application usage as that is outside of the scope of my guide today. All the links I show off I will include in the description below so you can easily find them if need be. One disclaimer I just want to mention is a warning that this is an operating system install guide where I completely remove the previous operating system or operating systems. As is with any operating system, you might run into unforeseen issues. So you have to go into this with an open mind that issues might spring up. Worst case, you can always attempt to install a different operating system back on the computer. If you need help, I have many different Windows and Linux guides to accomplish this on my channel. Before I begin, I also just want to mention that if you're feeling generous, to think about donating to support my channel on either Ko-Fi or Patreon. Every bit goes right back into making new guides. Alright, with all that said, let's dive into it. Alright, so let's talk about the system requirements for Windows 11. So just as it mentions on this page, which again, as I mentioned before, everything I show off I will have links for in the description below in case you want to reference any of this on your own. But anyhow, for a processor, you're going to want 1 GHz or faster with 2 or more cores. It has to be a 64-bit processor, 4 GB of RAM, storage, you're looking at 64 gigs of hard drive space or larger. Solid state drive would be certainly ideal at this point. System firmware, it's basically saying it needs to have a UEFI BIOS with secure boot capable. You need to have a TPM version 2 module, and then the graphics and display stuff is pretty easy to attain with the processor requirements that are needed. Because the thing is that you effectively need a machine that is from roughly 2019 or newer in order to actually run Windows 11. The other thing is that it does also have Copilot Plus requirements. Basically, you need specific CPUs that have an NPU on board, and then 16 gigs of DDR5 or LPDDR5 and 256 gigs storage. So anyhow, let's jump to downloading Windows 11 25H2. Now on the Windows 11 download page, you have 3 options, and I'll talk about them once I scroll down a little bit here. So the first option is the Windows 11 Installation Assistant. Now with the Windows 11 Installation Assistant, this is how you can actually take a Windows 10 machine and attempt to upgrade it to Windows 11 if you meet the hardware requirements for Windows 11. The other option is to create a Windows 11 installation media, aka creating a bootable USB thumb drive which has Windows 11 25H2 on it, and this is utilizing their special media creation tool which automatically provisions the thumb drive once it's downloaded. If you don't want to use the media creation tool, then if you scroll down a little bit more, there's the download Windows 11 disk ISO image, and this is where you can select your options, and then you click confirm and it will download the ISO, and you could either use something like Rufus or Etcher to create a bootable thumb drive with it. One thing just to mention is that if you're on an ARM64 device, then you would have to click here to download that specific ISO image. Anyhow, for today, I'm going to utilize the media creation tool, aka option 2 that I show. So I'm going to click download now. I'm just going to go to my downloads. I'm just going to click on open file. And then if you get the UAC prompt, select yes for this. Alright, so at this point you will need to plug in a USB thumb drive that's 8 GB or larger in size. If you don't have an 8 GB or larger thumb drive on hand, I will have a link for some inexpensive name brand ones in the description below that will get the job done. So anyhow, I plugged my USB thumb drive in, so let's continue on. So I'll click accept. It's going to say getting a few things ready. Just be patient as this crunches. And then I leave this all as is, leave the use recommended options for this PC, click on next, make sure you've got the 8 GB or larger thumb drive, and then have it plugged in. And one thing just to note is that you can also download the ISO file in this section as well if you needed to burn it to a DVD, or you were using it for like a virtual machine or something like that. But anyhow, we'll leave this as USB flash drive, click on next, and hopefully your USB thumb drive will show up in here. If it does not, I would recommend unplugging it, give it a few seconds, plug it back in. If it still doesn't show up, I would recommend rebooting your machine with the thumb drive in and see if that works. Worst case, you can always attempt to format the thumb drive, and sometimes it'll make it happier so that it will show up here. You can also click the refresh drive list as well a few times to see if that will make it happy. Anyhow, we'll click on next, and then we'll wait for this to start crunching. It may take some time to download and all that good stuff depending on your internet connection, as well as how fast your USB thumb drive is. So we'll just sit back and continue on once this is done. Now if all goes well, we should see that your USB flash drive is ready, and it will probably reference the drive letter for your thumb drive. If for some reason error it out, then I would just reboot your machine and try it again. If it still fails, it might be worth trying a different USB thumb drive and see if that helps at all. Anyhow, I'm going to click on finish, and it's going to do a quick cleanup, and then we will continue on. So the other thing that we need to do, and this is really the most difficult part in my opinion of trying to get the operating system installed, is that you need to figure out the key that you need to press on your machine to get it to boot off of the USB thumb drive. My recommendation is to Google your exact make and model and figure out what key you need to press when you turn your machine on and see your post screen or the manufacturer's logo screen. If you built your machine, I would just Google the motherboard make and model, and that should give you information into what key you need to press. So anyhow, I'm going to plug the USB thumb drive into my machine, and I will press the special key to get it to boot off the thumb drive. I'm going to mash the special key right now. So the thing is that every boot menu can be different depending on, again, make and model. The key thing to look for is, as you can see here, there's USB HDD or USB hard disk drive. It may mention USB thumb drive. It could even mention a USB virtual CD drive. Anyhow, we'll just use the down arrow, or if you have mouse support at this point, you can also click on it. So anyhow, I'm going to just select my Samsung flash drive, hit enter, and then let's just wait for this to load into memory and we can continue on. So the very first screen you're going to be met with is the language to install and the time and currency format that you can change. Now the language to install doesn't actually allow you to change it because this is built off of the ISO that was actually loaded onto the thumb drive, which would have been selected during the media creation portion. However, the time and currency formats can be altered during this process. Anyhow, mine looks fine, so I'll click on next. Next, you're going to have the keyboard settings, so you can choose your different keyboard input method here if you wanted to. I'm going to leave mine on US, click next. Next up is the select setup option. So you have the option to either install Windows 11 or you can attempt to repair your machine if you needed to, if something was wrong with it. Now one thing just to mention is that at this point, we are going to nuke the current operating system on the machine and we're going to start with a clean slate. So if there's anything you need to back up, please back it up. You can close out of this, boot the machine again, back up what you need, and then go through the steps of just getting it to boot off the thumb drive again and get to this point. I will also mention that this is not a dual boot video. This is strictly just installing Windows 11 as the only operating system on this machine. The other thing is that you do have to check, I agree everything will be deleted, including files, apps, and settings, before you continue on with the installation process of Windows 11. So I checked that, so now the next button is no longer grayed out, and we can click on next. And then let's just give this a moment to further load things into memory. So now we will accept the user agreement. Please wait. Searching for disks. Alright, so at the disk section, it's going to show both your hard drive in the machine, and it's also going to show the thumb drive. So in my case, disk 0 is the hard drive in my machine, and it has different partitions. What we're going to do is we're going to delete all partitions for disk 0, and once again, this is destroying the data on these partitions. So at this point, disk 0 should be only one section showing up as unallocated space. It's a 500 gig solid state drive, but of course, modern formatting and whatnot makes it smaller. So this all looks fine. We'll highlight the hard drive and we will click on next. One thing I should also mention is if for some reason the hard drive does not show up here, you may need to go to the load driver section. If you have to use the load driver option, you will need to put your storage controller drivers on a thumb drive or something and then plug that in, and then you can do a refresh and then do a load driver and then select the driver from that. This day I haven't actually seen that really be a thing because Windows usually has the base drivers or universal drivers that usually get the job done to get you to this point. Anyhow, everything looks fine here, so I will click on next. And at this point it's saying that it's ready to install. It's going to install Windows 11 Pro, at least on my machine. You may also have Home show up and that's fine. And that's going to say it's keeping nothing, which means it's going to delete all the data, which technically we already did when we nuked all the partitions. So anyhow, we're going to click on install, and then at this point we just have to sit back and wait for this to crunch. It's going to go through a few screens, it may reboot a few times, and then it's going to bring us into another setup section, which will continue on once we get there. And you might see some black screens like this where it just shows more installation stuff happening, but once again, just be patient as it keeps crunching. Alright, so we should be met with the is this the right country or region screen, so you can choose your country or region in this section and then click on yes. And it's going to ask you, is this the right keyboard layout or input method, so choose which one works best for you. You can scroll and find what looks good for you. Click on yes when you're ready, and then you can add a second keyboard layout if you want, so you can click the add layout or you can skip it. I'm going to skip it. And it's going to check for updates and it may reboot. And then it's going to give you the option to name your computer. So this is the name or host name of the machine. You can technically skip it and it will put in a generic name. However, I would recommend just taking this moment and just put in a customized name. You can name it whatever you want as long as it fits within these constraints down below. I'm just going to call mine W11 Desktop and I'm going to click Next. You may have moments where the screen flickers as well, as it's actually trying to side load in drivers that are part of the base Windows 11 driver repository that it has. In this case, it's going to go ahead and reboot and then we can continue on with the process. Next, it's going to ask us how we want to set up this device. So you can set it up for personal use or you can set it up for work or school. Work or school for the most part would be if you're trying to join it to a domain or something of that sort. In this case, I'm going to do set up for personal use and click on next. It's going to check for updates again. So here's the thing, this is going to be kind of a fork in the road or a choose your own adventure at this point. As you can see, the screen is flickering as it's side loading those drivers I was talking about. If this screen section goes white and it doesn't come back, if you generally left click into it, it will show the text again. So the fork in the road or the choose your own adventure is whether or not you want to sign in with a Microsoft account or not. So if you sign in with a Microsoft account, then you would put in your email address for that Microsoft account, you would put in the password for it, and then it would go through several screens where you can select kind of the different options that you may want to sync and all that good stuff, and then it will eventually get you to the desktop. So if you click sign in here, just as I mentioned, then it will pop up asking you to put in your email address, and then like I said, you would click next and go through all those different steps. However, if you want to not use a Microsoft account and force a local account on here, let me go ahead and show you those steps right now. So if you do Shift F10, it will force a command prompt window to pop up, and then type in ncpa.cpl and hit enter. And this is going to make it so that network connection settings section pops up. You may have a hardwired network, you may have a wireless network, you might have both. The key thing is that you need to disable both of them. So to disable it, just right click on it and then select disable. And then like I said, if you've got wireless or you got multiple Ethernet connections, or even if Bluetooth shows up in here, right click them all and disable it. We will enable them after the fact once we create the local account and get into Windows. And what this is basically doing is telling the operating system that there actually is no means of connecting to the internet. So it forces a local account to be created. We can close out of the network connections screen now. We do need to keep command prompt open to continue on with the next command that we're going to type in. Next up, we need to type in oob or out of box experience and then /bypass NRO and then hit enter, and it's going to reboot the machine, and then we should be able to continue on with it forcing a local account for us. And then we're going to go through most of the same screens that we previously saw. So once again, choose your country or region, select yes once you're good with that. Select the right keyboard layout again, select yes for that. If you want a secondary keyboard, add it. I will skip this. And then this is where it's basically saying, hey, I'd really like to connect to the internet. And then it's also given the option to install a driver, but we're going to click on I don't have internet. So this is the forced screen. And then this is where we actually create the local user account. So type in a name for your local user account. I'll just call it digital, click next. And then I would recommend you set a password, but you can also click next for this and skip it. And you can always add a password after the fact. I'm just going to go ahead and not type in a password. And this is because a lot of times I will add a password after the fact, just because it's faster for me to do Windows updates and install all my apps and whatnot without constantly having to keep checking back at it, logging in, seeing where it's at kind of thing. But once again, completely up to you. Set it here or set it later, whichever, but I do recommend setting a password for security purposes. Click on next, and then this is all completely up to you. I like to leave location services on, especially so that it properly synchronizes date and time, stuff like that. Find My Device I turn off. Diagnostic data, I set it to the required amount only. Inking and typing, I turn off. Tailored experiences, I turn off as well. But once again, completely up to you if you want to leave them on or off. But I'm going to click accept now. And then we'll just wait for this to provision the profile so that it will fully log in and we can continue on. All right, so we are in. So if you had created a Microsoft account, then chances are you already are connected to the internet and all that good stuff. If you did the local account bypass, then we need to turn our network connections back on. So if that's the case, let's go to settings, network and internet. Let me maximize this. Advanced network settings. And then let's just enable all of our network adapters. In this case, mine just has the Ethernet, so that's back on. And we should see the network adapter is now coming back to life. So at this point, everything is installed. However, I'm going to go through the next steps of further solidifying the install of the operating system by installing drivers and doing Windows updates, as well as also fine-tuning the operating system a little bit, turning off some features that in my opinion are not needed, or they actually cause more harm than good. So once again, completely optional, but feel free to keep watching for kind of my tips and tricks section of this video. So the first thing I'm going to do, and this is probably really just affecting users who did the local account bypass, is just forcing the date and time to adjust properly. So I'm going to go down to the bottom right hand corner, right click on the date and time, click adjust date and time. I'm going to adjust my time zone. I'll set mine to Eastern once I can find it here. And then I'm going to toggle on the set time zone automatically, which should also force a time sync. If the sync is still not working properly, turn off set time automatically and then toggle it back on, and that will force a sync. You can also go to the additional settings and you can sync now as well. A lot of times though, I've seen this error out and that set time automatically kind of works better. So anyway, we can close out of that. If you want your start menu to be over to the left-hand side, like in the previous versions of Windows, if you right-click on the taskbar, go to Taskbar Settings, and then click on Taskbar Behaviors. And then if I scroll down, so there's Taskbar Alignment, I can set this to left, so now it forces it over, as you would see with like Windows 10 and whatnot. The other thing just to mention while we're in here is that you can adjust the search window, as you see in the bottom left. You can make it from a search box to search icon and label to search icon only, and you can also hide it. You can also turn off task view and widgets if you want to further reclaim some taskbar space. This is also another section where you can change up your taskbar system tray section. So for instance, if we look at other system tray icons, drop this down, we can actually turn off and on things in our tray. Now you can either do it this way, or if you click the little caret and you grab one of these icons, you can then manually drag it down. So just as you see here, and then if you have everything in the system tray, then that little caret disappears. And if you want to hide them again, you could come back into personalization under taskbar and you can toggle them back off if you wanted to. But anyhow, just a number of options. Close out of that. While also talking about the taskbar, if you're not going to use OneDrive, you can right click on the taskbar, go to Task Manager, and then locate the Startup Apps little icon. And then we can go in here, we can highlight it. You can either right click on it and select Disable, or you can also click Disable or Enable up here. This is one place that's really good to come into every so often and turn off some things that you feel are not needed to be starting up automatically with the machine. It helps with boot times and less services running in the background. Just be mindful that some of these may be required apps to be running for dependencies for other applications to be working. Anyhow, I'll close out of that. The other thing is I'm not a fan of the light mode taskbar in Windows 11. If you right click on the background, select personalize, you can select colors and then choose your mode. You can change this to dark and then that will force the taskbar to go into dark mode. If you go back, you can also change up your desktop backgrounds if you wanted to. You can also adjust themes and a bunch of other stuff that you can take a peek at in here. But I'll close out of that. The other thing is technically setting dark mode on will help you conserve power. So if you're on a laptop and you have dark mode on, technically it actually helps reduce the power usage of your machine. One last thing while we are going over the taskbar and whatnot is that if you don't want Microsoft 365 Copilot, you can just right click on it here, click unpin from taskbar. If you want to change up the sorting of your shortcuts, then you can just drag them around however you want. One thing I also find kind of silly is that you have Microsoft Edge on the desktop and you have Microsoft Edge down on the taskbar. So a lot of times I'll just right click on Microsoft Edge up here and I will toss it in the recycle bin. And then we can just right click on that empty recycle bin, clear that out. One other thing to go over with the desktop is that if we actually right click on the desktop and go to personalize again, we can add in the This PC icon by selecting themes. And then I'll scroll down, desktop icon settings. Depending on what your resolution is, you either have to scroll down or it's on the right hand side. And then you can turn on whichever desktop icons you want here or turn them off. I'm just going to add computer, click apply, okay, and then now this PC's on here. And since I'm old-fashioned, I'm going to align it so that it's set to how old-timey Windows used to be. So next up is going to be the process of installing the drivers on your machine. If you're not familiar with what drivers are, it's the software that you install in the operating system, which allows the operating system to better utilize the hardware of your computer. It turns on capabilities, especially if you have like dedicated graphics cards. You want to download your NVIDIA or AMD drivers, or potentially even Intel graphic drivers, so that you are fully utilizing your graphics card and that they're up to date. So if you're playing games or hardcore applications, it's best to have those up to date so that they are working tip-top for you. So to do so, and this is going to be completely different depending on your make and model, but if you open up Edge, once again, you could always download Chrome or something else. And while we're actually in Edge, I'm going to click the little page settings icon. I'm going to get rid of all this clickbait garbage. I literally turn basically all of this stuff off, show content off. There we go. Now it's clean. It makes Edge a little more manageable to use. Anyhow, so what I would do is search for your specific make and model machine. So in my case, I know mine's a Lenovo, so I'm actually just going to go to Lenovo's website, lenovo.com. I will go to support, technical support, and then I'll click on PC, and then I can type in my make and model here. So 720Q, I'll go to downloads, drivers and software. Let me actually adjust my resolution because this is starting to be a little difficult to view. So I'm just going to minimize that. I'm going to right click on the background, display settings, and I'm going to up my resolution to the proper resolution. You probably don't have to do this. Yours probably is auto-detecting the monitor's resolution automatically. But if it's not, you can go there and change up your resolution to what your actual screen resolution is. Anyhow, I'm going to go to manual update. Some sites have that automatic downloader that you may have seen on the left, but I like to do this manually. And so my general rule of thumb of downloading these is, let me minimize this for a second. So I like to create a drivers folder on the desktop, and then I like to create a chipset, storage controller, network, graphics, and sound folder. You might have some additional hardware on your machine, but this generally covers everything. And I've got them numbered because this is my kind of general rule of thumb of what gets installed first. So base chipset drivers, storage controller, if you have that driver available, network, so this would be Ethernet and wireless, graphics, this would be either integrated graphics or dedicated graphics, and then sound. So what I like to do is I like to go through and download those within your manufacturer's web portal. Now, if you do have dedicated graphics, such as NVIDIA graphics, then what you would do is just go to nvidia.com, then go to drivers in the top right, and then you can select which style of video card you've got. So you actually do have some different selections up here you can choose from. There's for gamers, for creatives, for visual design stuff, and there's also workstation users who may have Quadro cards. Now, if you do click on one of these, it does give you the option for the Get Automatic Driver Updates by downloading the NVIDIA app, and this will automatically detect your graphics card. If you do download this and it doesn't automatically detect the graphics card at first, then I would choose the option on the left to manually download it and install it. Usually this is pretty good about detecting it, and you can utilize the NVIDIA app to keep your drivers up to date. You'll just have to periodically launch it and check every so often. I like to check once a month or so. That way everything is tip-top, up to date and fresh. Anyhow, I'm going to go through the boring process of downloading the drivers and going through and installing them, literally just clicking through all the next windows. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and then we will come back once all the drivers are installed and continue on the process. Alright, so with the drivers installed, I went ahead and rebooted my machine. At this point, I'm just going to get rid of them because I don't need those anymore. I'll just get rid of that. So the next big thing is going to be running Windows updates. So if you go to Start, Settings, and then Windows Update, and then one thing before we click on Download and Install All, if we scroll down, there's a few other options that a lot of people don't realize. One, for instance, is get the latest updates as soon as they're available. This is completely optional. This makes it so that potentially you can get out-of-band updates. So out-of-band means updates that did not release in that month's Patch Tuesday. So Patch Tuesday is the second Tuesday of every month that Microsoft patches come out. So checking that makes it so that if an update came out that fixes some sort of bug that was not in a Patch Tuesday, it may take it. The problem is that you may get reboot prompts more frequently as those updates are trickling in every so often throughout the month. The other option is the advanced options. So we go into this. So there's receive updates for other Microsoft products. I recommend turning that on. Get me up to date. So this says restart as soon as possible, even during active hours to finish updating. I like to turn this on just for the first time that I do Windows updates. However, you can also just leave it on. The problem is that you'll be randomly working and then you'll get a pop-up saying that your machine is going to reboot in 15 minutes. So if you don't want that, you can toggle this back off after the fact. Download updates over metered connections. I just toggle that on just in case for some reason it thinks I'm on a metered connection. Completely optional to you. And then there's notify me when a restart is required to finish updating. I do like to turn that on as well. But once again, these are all optional, but this is what I'm going to do. And then we're going to do download and install all, and then just be patient as this crunches. Sometimes you might see some of these fail because of the fact that I already installed all the drivers when it had previously checked for updates before the drivers were installed. So anyhow, we'll just let this crunch and we will continue on once this is done. So if you see updates failed, just click on retry all. So at this point, it should say you're up to date. You may see the cumulative update previews showing up. You don't have to download these unless you feel as though you have some sort of bug that's popping up or something, but completely optional, so we can close out of that. One thing we're going to take a look at in the bottom right hand corner, you'll notice the shield has a little exclamation on it. Let's double click on that. Alright, so device security, so it's just saying it wants us to sign in with a Microsoft account. We can just dismiss that and make it happy. So these are some optional optimizations that we're going to do. One of them is going to be a number of settings in the control panel, in the old control panel for power options. So let's go to Start, and then let's type in Control Panel, or just Control is enough, and then just hit Enter. And so the old control panel is still here. I'm going to just adjust the categories to large icons, and then we're going to look for power options. And then what we're going to take a look at is change the computer sleeps. So if this is a laptop, you may want to just leave this all as is. However, if it's a desktop, you may want to set the machine to never sleep. And then you may even want to make it so that the monitor maybe turns off in 15 minutes. So these are all things you can adjust. I'll leave mine as that and save the settings. The other thing is up at the top, choose what the power buttons do. If we click on this, there's this setting right here, turn on fast startup recommended. The thing is that fast startup is actually just another variant of hibernation. So if you shut your machine down thinking that you're resolving an issue with some sort of app is acting up or something like that, you turn it back on, it's just resuming the computer again with that corruption or whatever that's happening. So to make sure that when the machine is actually shut down, that it's a clean shutdown. So to turn this off, we can click on change settings that are currently unavailable, uncheck that, and then down at the bottom, click on save settings. So another thing that involves hibernation. So hibernation, even for a laptop this day and age, I don't usually have it on, and also it chews up hard drive space. And so if you're on a desktop, for instance, you're probably definitely not using hibernation. So to turn it off, we can go to Start and then type in Command, and then we're looking for Command Prompt, and let's select Run as Administrator for that, and select Yes for the UAC prompt. We'll type in power CFG space / hibernate space off. Hit Enter, and now that's turned off. So now we just freed up a fair amount of disk space that will just forever not be utilized. So one thing I did forget to go over is the Microsoft Store. So the thing is that you do your Windows updates, but then the Microsoft Store also has updates for the apps that you have on your machine. So if we go down to the Microsoft Store and then go to Downloads, and then up here, let's click on Check for Updates. And even though, as you see here, a bunch of apps have already updated, let's just make sure that they actually are all up to date. A lot of this stuff, like the Windows Web Experience Pack, and there's a few other base system tools that actually get updated within this. So that's why I recommend checking this every so often. Usually they update automatically without you realizing it, but sometimes it seems as though these updates will stall out. As you can see here, now it's pulling in a whole bunch of stuff. A lot of it may be hot garbage that you don't want, but my recommendation is update it first, and then you can always remove it after the fact. The reason as to why I say that is because some of these apps will actually sometimes fail to uninstall because they have a bug that will not allow it to be uninstalled properly. So you have to do the silly thing of force updating it and then uninstall it. And I like to check for updates one more time just to make sure it's not lying to me, because certain application platforms love to just say, yep, I'm up to date, and then you click it again and it said, oh, yep, I guess I'm not up to date, here's some more updates. Alright, so they are in fact up to date, so we can close out of that. So next up, and this is completely optional, is if we go to Edge, open up Edge and then go to the 3 dots on the top right hand corner, click on that, go to Settings, and then go to System and Performance, and then click on System, and then see this Startup Boost. I like to turn that off because Startup Boost makes it so that Edge will actually fire up and stay running behind the scenes. And I also like to turn off this Continue Running Background Extensions and Apps when Edge is closed. This is just more or less maximizing performance of your machine. Again, completely optional. So one last thing I want to show off is a means to kind of keep the clutter at bay. And so if we go to Start, we type in Disk for Disk Cleanup. Now we're not actually going to click on this. What we're going to do is open File Location, and then right click on Disk Cleanup. And let's click on Show More Options, and then create a shortcut. It's going to say it can't be created here, but we can toss it on the desktop, select yes for that, close out of that, and then right click on this and go to Properties, move this to the center of the screen, and then go to Advanced, and then check Run as Administrator, and click OK, Apply, and OK again. Now the thing with Disk Cleanup is that you could just right click on it and select Run as Administrator, but in case you forget about that, now if you just double click on it, it's always going to run it as an administrator. Now the reason as to why we run it as an administrator is because otherwise it may not find all of the bloat, garbage, cache, Windows updates that aren't needed anymore, all that good stuff. So this just makes it so that you've got a handy desktop icon, you can double click on it. I recommend doing this once every 2-3 months or so, but what I like to do is I check everything. And the funny thing is, this is a fresh installation of Windows 11, and already there's 2.49 gigs of just trash that's not needed. So we can now click on OK, delete files, and then just give this a moment to crunch. When you go through a few Patch Tuesdays, that's when you start seeing Windows updates that are no longer needed, and then it will clear those out for you. And then with that done, then I just recommend a reboot. Alright, so at this point, there's just one last thing I want to show off, and that is just the Start menu. So if you click on the Start menu, you may notice that there's some stuff in here that you don't want. For instance, Xbox. If you right click on this, you can do an uninstall, and then just click uninstall, and that will get rid of it for you. Same as for LinkedIn. You can uninstall it, uninstall again, and it clears it out for you. So feel free to go through and strip stuff out. So that's all you need to do to install Windows 11 25H2 from start to finish. If you found this video to be useful, please like it and subscribe to my channel to keep up on my latest video happenings. I also invite you to check out my channel if you haven't already, as it has many interesting guides and many more to come. Anyhow, until next time, take it easy.